My name is Owen Marsh, and I am 46 years old. Last Thursday, I sat across a conference table from the man who fired me 2 years ago and watched him ask me for a job. Roland Pierce, who once built commercial mechanical systems for half the county, who used to call me his right hand and mean it the way a man means a threat, sat there in a suit that no longer fit him and slid a folder across the table and asked if I would consider buying what was left of his company. His hands were shaking. Not from age, from the arithmetic. Because the 3 biggest accounts that used to keep Pierce Mechanical alive were no longer his. They were mine. They had walked out his door and across town and signed with me, one by one, and he had spent 2 years watching it happen and telling himself it could not be real. For 22 years I gave that man my loyalty, my Saturdays, my best work, and the single biggest client he ever had. And when the payout he promised me in writing finally came due, he manufactured a reason to push me out the door so he would not have to honor it, and he handed my work to his nephew like it was a set of car keys. But here is what Roland Pierce did not understand. Not then, and maybe not even now. A boss can take your title. He can take your desk, your parking spot, your name off the account. But he cannot take the thing that actually built his company, which was never the equipment. It was the trust I spent 22 years earning with every client, one honest job at a time. He thought that trust belonged to Pierce Mechanical. It belonged to me. It always had. And the day he pushed me out, he handed me the only asset that ever mattered, and he did not even know he was doing it. Before we get into this, if you are new here, please take a moment to like and subscribe. It genuinely helps this channel more than you know. And while you are here, do me a favor and drop a comment telling me where in the world you are watching from and what time it is where you are. I read every single one, and I love seeing how far these stories travel. Now let me take you back to the beginning, to a 19-year-old kid with grease under his fingernails and a job log his father made him keep. I grew up in Delham, a working town in the flat middle of the state, the kind of place built around a rail yard and 3 factories, 2 of which closed before I finished high school. My father, Walt Marsh, was a millwright for 34 years, a man who kept the big machines running in the paper mill out on the county road. He was not an educated man in the way people mean that, but he taught me the one thing that has been worth more to me than any degree. He taught me to keep a job book. Every day of his working life, my father wrote down what he did in a black hardbound ledger. The date, the machine, the problem, the fix, the parts, the hours. Not because anyone told him to, because, he said, a working man's word is only as good as his records, and the day will come, son, when a man in a nicer shirt than yours tells everyone a story about what happened, and on that day, the only thing that will save you is the truth written down in your own hand, dated where nobody can touch it. I did not understand it at 19. I understand it now more than I understand almost anything. I remember the day it stopped being a chore and started being a religion. I was maybe 16, working a summer at the mill alongside my father, and a foreman blamed a line shutdown on a repair my dad had done the week before, said Walt had cut a corner, said it in front of the whole crew. My father did not argue, he did not raise his voice. He walked to his locker, took out the black ledger, opened it to the dated entry, and laid it on the table, the part number he had installed, the torque spec, the inspection he had logged, the name of the second man who had verified it, and the foreman went quiet, and then the foreman went away, and the real cause turned out to be a part someone else had installed after my father's shift. On the drive home, my dad did not say "I told you so." He just tapped the ledger on the seat between us and said, "This is the only lawyer a working man can afford, and it never sleeps." I bought my first one the week I started at Pierce Mechanical. I have never been without one since. I started at Pierce Mechanical in the spring I turned 24, after 4 years installing ductwork for a residential outfit that went under. Pierce did the big stuff: commercial, industrial, hospitals, cold storage, distribution centers, the mechanical guts of buildings most people never think about, the heating and cooling and refrigeration that keeps a hospital's operating rooms alive and a food warehouse from spoiling $10 million of inventory. Roland Pierce had started the company in his garage and grown it to about 40 employees by the time I walked in. He was charming in the way that successful salesmen are charming, warm and quick and generous with a compliment, and he took a liking to me because I showed up early, and I kept from my very first week a job book. My father's habit. Every account, every service call, every promise made and kept, dated in my own hand in a black ledger exactly like Walt Marsh's, which I bought at the same office supply store on 3rd Street that my father had used for 30 years. I earned my name at Pierce the slow way. In my 2nd year, we did a job for a food distribution warehouse where the refrigeration on a whole section failed on a Friday night, and the client stood to lose a truckload of product over the weekend. The senior man on the account wanted to patch it cheap and bill it big. I would not sign off on a patch I did not believe in, and I told the client the honest thing, which was that they needed a real repair and it would cost more, and I stayed late Friday and came in Saturday to do it right. That repair cost Pierce Mechanical a little margin, but the plant manager never forgot it, and for the next 18 years he sent me every piece of business he had and told everyone he knew that the guy to call at Pierce was Owen Marsh, not because I was cheap, but because I would tell him the truth, even when the truth cost me. That is how you build a name in the trades, not with a brochure. One honest Saturday at a time for 20 years, until the name is worth more than the company it is attached to, which in the end it was. I want to be honest about something, because these stories are always told like the narrator saw it coming from day one, and that is not the truth. I loved that job. I loved Roland Pierce. For the better part of 2 decades, that man felt like a second father to me. He came to my wedding. He held my daughter Katie when she was 3 days old and cried. When my father passed, Roland closed the shop for the funeral and stood in the back of the church in a black suit and put his hand on my shoulder afterward and said, "Your dad raised a good man, Owen. You're the best I've got." I believed every word of it. I had no reason not to. For 18 years, Roland Pierce was good to me, and I gave him everything I had, and the company grew because of it, and I do not regret a single honest day of that work even now. You need to understand that the betrayal, when it came, did not come from a villain I should have spotted. It came from a man I loved, which is the only kind of betrayal that actually leaves a mark. I was good at the work, and I got better every year. By my mid-30s, I was not turning wrenches anymore. I was the man who won the accounts and kept them. Roland could sell a first contract, but I was the one who made the clients stay, because I answered the phone at 2 in the morning when a hospital's chiller went down, because I never once billed a client for an hour we did not work, because I walked every job myself and told the truth even when the truth cost us money. In 22 years, I built relationships with facility directors and plant managers all over 3 counties, and those men did not trust Pierce Mechanical. They trusted Owen Marsh. When they called the office and I was out, they would not talk to anyone else. They would say, "Have Owen call me back." Roland used to laugh about it at first. Later, I think it began to frighten him, though I did not see that yet. The biggest thing I ever built for that company was the Bethany Health account. Bethany was a regional hospital network, 4 facilities, and their mechanical contract was the largest single piece of business in the company's history, worth more than the next 5 accounts combined. I landed it the hard way over 18 months, starting with a single emergency call on a Sunday, when their downtown hospital lost cooling in the surgical wing during a heat wave, and their existing contractor did not answer the phone. I did. I drove down in shorts and a Bethany Health t-shirt somebody handed me, and I did not leave that mechanical room for 31 hours. And when it was over, the facilities director, a careful, decent man named Paul Whitfield, shook my hand and said, "You just became our contractor. Let me tell you what those 31 hours were, because they are the reason everything else in this story happened the way it did. It was 101 degrees outside, and the surgical wing was climbing past the limit, where they would have had to cancel operations and divert patients. The chiller that fed that wing had thrown a compressor, and the manufacturer said the replacement part was 3 days out. 3 days was not an option, not with an operating schedule and sick people in the balance. So I did what my father would have done. I found a way. I called in a favor from a supplier 200 miles away who put the part on a driver's personal truck at midnight. I rebuilt what I could rebuild while I waited. I did not sleep. I did not leave. I ate a vending machine sandwich standing up at 4 in the morning, And when the surgical wing came back online at noon the next day, not one procedure had been cancelled. Paul Whitfield had stayed the whole night too, because that is the kind of man he is, and he had watched me the entire time. He did not hire me because Pierce Mechanical had a good brochure. He hired me because he watched a man refuse to let a hospital down, and that is a thing you cannot fake and cannot delegate, and, as Roland would eventually learn, cannot inherit from your uncle. Over the next year and a half I earned the rest of it, and when the full network contract came to Pierce Mechanical, Roland Pierce made more money than he had ever made in his life, and he knew because he told me exactly whose relationship had brought it in. That was when Roland made me the promise, and this is the part where my father's lessons stop being a nice story about a black ledger and start being the reason I am sitting here today, instead of ruined. Roland took me to dinner the week the Bethany contract signed. He ordered a good bottle of wine, and he got a little emotional the way he did, and he said, "Owen, I want you to be a partner in this thing. You built the Bethany account, and there's going to be a lot more of them. And I want you to have a piece." He put numbers to it. 3% ownership vesting over 5 years, plus an override commission of 2% on the Bethany account for as long as it renewed. On a contract that size, over years, that was life-changing money. Retirement money. My kids' college money. I told him I did not need it in writing because I trusted him. And Roland, God help me, Roland said, "No, we'll put it in writing, because that's how you do things right. That's how your dad would have done it, and he did." He sent me an email the next Monday laying out the whole arrangement, the 3%, the vesting, the 2% Bethany override, in his own words, from his own account. I read it twice. Then I did what my father taught me. I printed it, dated it, and I filed it in the back of the job book, and I saved the email to a personal folder. And I did not think about it again for 4 years, because I trusted the man and because I had work to do. Here is what I have learned about promises that go in writing and then sit for years. The man who made them starts to forget he made them. Time passes, the numbers get bigger, and one day the promise stops feeling like a debt he owes and starts feeling like money that is being taken from him. That is what happened to Roland. The Bethany account grew. My 2% override grew with it. The 5-year vesting on my ownership was coming due. And somewhere in that 4th year, Roland Pierce did the math on what he had promised me and decided he did not want to pay it. He never said that, of course. Men like Roland never say the true thing. They build a story instead, and then they make the story come true. The first sign was the nephew. Roland's sister's boy, Tyler, 26, came onto the sales side that spring, and Roland started sending him with me to the Bethany meetings. "Get Tyler up to speed on the account," he said. "Good for continuity." I did not think much of it. I introduced Tyler to Paul Whitfield and the plant managers, walked him through the systems, taught him the account the way you teach anyone. I was training my own replacement, and I did not know it. Because that is exactly what Roland was doing. He was papering the file so that when the moment came, he could tell a story in which Tyler had a relationship with Bethany, in which the account did not belong to me, in which the 2% I was owed was somehow no longer mine to claim. The pretext when it came was almost insulting in how small it was. That summer, Roland instituted a new expense policy, and 3 weeks later, he called me into his office with Tyler and the office manager, sitting there like a tribunal, and he told me I had violated it. I had, on a service trip to the Bethany facility, 90 miles out, bought dinner for 2 plant managers and put it on the company card, $41, the kind of thing I had done 100 times in 22 years with Roland's full blessing. Now, suddenly, it was a policy violation, a pattern of poor judgment, he called it. He said it in a grave, disappointed voice, the second father voice, and I sat there and understood, slowly and then all at once, what was actually happening. He was not upset about $41. He was building a file. He was writing the story in which Owen Marsh was a problem, so that when he took the Bethany account and gave it to Tyler and refused to pay my override and let my ownership evaporate, he would have a folder that said it was my fault. They did not fire me that day. They were smarter than that. They demoted me, quietly, moved me off the Bethany account for continuity reasons, put Tyler in as the lead, cut my role down until there was nothing left of it, and waited for me to quit, so they would not have to pay severance, or more importantly, so they could argue I had walked away from my ownership and my override voluntarily. You have to understand how deliberate the cruelty of that is, because it is the part that took me the longest to forgive. They did not want to fire me. Firing me would have triggered obligations, would have looked like what it was. What they wanted was for me to break, to lose my temper, to storm out, so that the story could be that Owen Marsh abandoned his post. So they made the job unlivable, an inch at a time. They took me off the accounts I built and gave me busy work. They stopped inviting me to the meetings I used to run. Tyler, 26 years old, started asking me questions in a tone that made clear he had been told he outranked me now. Men I had trained looked at their shoes when I passed them in the shop because they knew everyone knew. And there is a particular loneliness in being the last person in the building, to be allowed to pretend you do not know what is happening to you. I went home every night with my jaw aching from holding my face still, and every night I opened the black book, and I wrote the date. And I wrote down exactly what had been done to me that day, calmly, in my own hand. I was not keeping a diary. I was building the record. There is a difference, and Roland was about to learn it. For 3 months I watched Tyler sit in meetings I had built, with clients I had earned, while Roland avoided my eyes in the hallway. And the whole time, that written promise sat in the back of my father's job book, dated, in Roland's own hand where nobody could touch it. Those 3 months were the hardest of my working life, and not because of the money, though the money was frightening. It was the humiliation of it. The daily small deaths of walking into a place I had given 22 years and being treated like a man on his way out the door. I did not hide it well at home. Diane saw it. One night she found me in the garage at 11 o'clock, just sitting in the dark next to my father's old tool chest. And she pulled up a stool and sat with me and did not say anything for a long time. Then she said, "Owen, you have spent your whole life being the man who does the right thing when it costs him. Don't let Roland Pierce turn you into someone else in the last chapter. Whatever we do about this, we do it your way, your dad's way, not his." My daughter Katie, home from her first year of college, asked me one morning if we were going to be okay, and I looked at that girl and I made her a promise. I told her that a man's real net worth is not in his job title, it is in his name and his records and the people who trust him, and that on all 3 counts her father was a wealthy man, and that Roland Pierce was about to find out exactly how wealthy. I believed it when I said it, but I will be honest with you, some nights in that garage I was not sure. I want to tell you what I did in those 3 months, because it is the whole point of everything my father ever taught me. I did not explode. I did not storm into Roland's office and scream about the email. I did not tell Paul Whitfield the whole story and try to blow the account up out of spite. I did none of the things a loud man does, the things that feel good for an afternoon and cost you everything by nightfall. Instead, I went home and I sat at my kitchen table with my wife Diane, who is the steadiest person I have ever known, and we made a plan the way my father would have made it, quietly, on paper, with the truth on our side. First, I got my records in order. 22 years of job books, every Bethany service call in my own dated hand, the original email promising the 3% and the 2% override, every expense I had ever been approved to make, so that the $41 pretext would look exactly as small and manufactured as it was, and something else, something I had logged for years without ever intending to use it, because a man who keeps an honest job book cannot help but also record the dishonest things he sees. Over the years I had noted in passing, in my own ledger, the times Roland had billed cost-plus clients for marked-up parts at figures I knew were inflated, and the times the refrigerant compliance logs on certain jobs had been signed off on work that was never actually done to the standard the regulations require. I had never done anything with it. I was not that kind of man. But I had written it down, because my father taught me that you always write down the truth, all of it, even the parts you hope you never need. Second, I talked to a lawyer, a plain, sharp woman named Rosa Delgado, who did employment and contract work out of a small office downtown. I brought her the job books and the email, and she read the email twice, and then she looked at me over her glasses and said something I will never forget. She said, Mr. Marsh, your former boss put a compensation agreement in writing in his own words and then constructed a transparent pretext to avoid honoring it. In my experience, men who do that have usually left a great many other things they would not want examined under oath. She asked if there was anything else. I told her about the ledger notes on the billing and the compliance logs. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "You will likely never need to use that, but its existence changes everything about how this negotiation will go." She explained it to me plainly, and I want to explain it to you the same way, because it is the part people misunderstand about doing things the quiet way. Rosa said that a lawsuit is a fight in the open, where the loud man's story and your story go before a jury and anything can happen. But a settlement is a negotiation in the dark, and in the dark the side with the most to hide always loses. Roland had put a promise in writing. That alone gave me leverage. But the moment he understood that a real fight would open his books, his billing, his compliance records, 22 years of everything he had ever done, to sworn examination, he was not negotiating over my override anymore. He was negotiating for his survival, and he knew it, and I knew it, and Rosa knew it. She told me we would ask for exactly what I was owed, not $1 more, because a fair number is one a frightened man pays fast, and a greedy number is one he fights. My father would have approved of that. Take what is yours, he used to say, and not 1 cent that is not, because the man who overreaches gives the other man a reason to fight, and you never give a cornered man a reason. We asked for precisely what the email promised, and Roland paid. And here is the third thing, the thing that turned out to matter most of all, the thing Roland Pierce never saw coming, because he genuinely did not understand what his company was made of. My non-compete. Roland had made everyone sign one, a broad one, the kind that said, I could not work in commercial mechanical anywhere in the state for 2 years. He thought it was a wall around his clients. But Rosa read it and laughed gently, and explained that in our state, a non-compete that broad, that long, covering that much geography, was almost certainly unenforceable, and that no court would stop a man from earning a living in the only trade he had ever known. The wall, Roland thought, protected his accounts was made of paper, and not the good kind, not the kind my father kept. So I made my move, and I made it in silence. I resigned cleanly in a 2-sentence letter on a Friday. I did not accuse anyone of anything, and the following Monday, Rosa sent Roland Pierce a single quiet letter. It did not threaten, it did not rage. It simply laid out the written compensation agreement in his own words and requested that he honor it, and noted, in one dry sentence near the end, that my records from 22 years of service were thorough and complete and available, should any dispute proceed to discovery. That was all. 1 sentence. But Roland Pierce read that sentence, and he understood exactly what it meant because he knew better than I did everything that a full accounting of Pierce Mechanical's billing and compliance records would reveal if a court ever went looking. He settled in 11 days. He paid me every dollar of the 2% override I was owed to date and the value of the vested ownership, a sum with a comma in it that I will not name here. And he did it fast, and he did it quietly, because the alternative was a discovery process he could not survive. My father was right. The man in the nicer shirt told a story about what happened. And the truth, written down in my own hand, dated, where nobody could touch it, was the only thing that saved me. It saved me completely. I will tell you that Roland tried once to make it personal before he settled. He called my cell phone, not his lawyer to mine, him to me, late on a Sunday, and he used every register he had. First the second father voice, wounded and warm, telling me how much this hurt him, how he never thought I would turn on him like this, how my dad would be ashamed to see me lawyer up against the man who gave me everything. When that did not move me, he switched, the way men like that always do, and the warmth dropped off and something colder came in. And he reminded me that he had friends in this business, that a small town is a small town, that a man could find it hard to get work if the wrong people heard the wrong things about him. He was trying to make me afraid, and I want you to hear what I said, because I said it calmly and I meant every word. I said, Roland, I have 22 years of job books, and every single day of it is the truth, written in my own hand. You have a story you're telling. There is not a room in this state where your story beats my records, and I think somewhere in there you already know that." Then I wished him a good night, and I hung up, and I did not sleep worse for it. That was the last time Roland Pierce ever tried to raise his voice at me. 11 days later he paid, but the money was not the revenge. I want to be clear about that, because the money was only justice, and justice is not the same thing. The revenge, if that is even the word for it, was something Roland did to himself, and all I had to do was stop preventing it. Because the week I left Pierce Mechanical, my phone started ringing. Not Roland. Paul Whitfield from Bethany Health. He called me at home on a Tuesday night and he said, "Owen, I heard you're gone. What happened?" I told him only that I had decided to go out on my own, and I said nothing against Roland, because a man who trashes his old boss to a client only makes the client wonder what he will say about them someday. But Paul was quiet for a moment, and then he said the words that ended Pierce Mechanical. He said, "Owen, Bethany's contract was always with you, not with Roland, with you. When your non-compete lets you, you start your own shop, and you call me first." I started Marsh Mechanical out of a rented bay on the industrial side of town, with 2 technicians I trusted, and a used service truck, and the same black hardbound job book I bought on 3rd Street the week I turned 24. It was not glamorous, and I will not pretend it was easy. At 44 years old, with a daughter in college, I emptied a good part of the settlement into a business that could have failed. And there were mornings that first winter, when I sat in that cold rented bay with 2 employees depending on me, and wondered if I had traded a steady humiliation for an unsteady ruin. My 2 techs, Marcus and Dell, had followed me out of loyalty, and I felt the weight of that every single day, the way my father must have felt it, the responsibility of other men's families riding on whether you are as good as they believe you are. I answered every call myself. I did the estimates at the kitchen table at night with Diane checking my math. I underbid nothing and I overpromised nothing, and I wrote every job in the black book the same as I had for 22 years. And slowly, one honest job at a time, the phone started ringing more than it rang the week before. And when the Bethany Health contract came up for renewal, Paul Whitfield put it out to bid, fair and open. And I bid it honestly, and Bethany awarded the largest mechanical contract in the region to a company that was 4 months old and operated out of a single rented bay, because the contract had never really belonged to Pierce Mechanical. I want to tell you the thing Paul Whitfield said to me the day the award came through, because I have carried it ever since. I had gone to see him, nervous as a boy, half afraid he would feel I was putting him in a hard spot, and I started to apologize for the awkwardness of it, and he stopped me. He said, "Owen, let me tell you how this works from our side. We don't buy equipment, and we don't buy a company name. We buy the man who's going to answer the phone at 2 in the morning when there are patients in that surgical wing. For 22 years, that man has been you. It was never Pierce. It was never that nephew. It was you in a borrowed t-shirt for 31 hours, and everybody in our building knows it." Then he said the part I gave to my daughter Katie later, word for word. He said, "A contract is just paper catching up to a relationship that already exists." Roland Pierce spent 4 years believing he owned that relationship because his name was on the paper. But paper only ever catches up to the truth. It cannot create it, and it cannot keep it once it walks out the door. It belonged to the trust I had spent 22 years earning, one honest job at a time, and that trust walked across town and signed with me. Within the year, 2 more of my old accounts followed. The cold storage distributor and the community college campus, both of them decision-makers who had told me for years that they did not deal with Pierce. They dealt with Owen. I never once solicited them in violation of anything. I did not have to. I just answered the phone the way I always had. I will never forget the day the Bethany Award came through. Diane and I were at the kitchen table doing the numbers on whether we could even afford to take a contract that size with a 4-month-old company. And the email came in from Paul Whitfield's office. And I read it twice the way I read Roland's promise all those years before, and then I put my head down on the table and I wept. Not from triumph, from something closer to vindication, the deep kind. The kind that says, the way your father taught you to live was not a fool's way after all. That honesty and records and answering the phone at 2 in the morning are not quaint. That they are, in the end, the only durable thing a working man builds. Diane put her hand on the back of my neck and she said, "Your dad would have loved this." And he would have. He would have opened a black ledger and written the date. Pierce Mechanical lost more than half its revenue in 18 months. Tyler, it turned out, had learned the mechanics of the Bethany account but not the 22 years of trust underneath it. And trust is not a thing you can be handed like a set of car keys, which is exactly what Roland tried to do. I heard about how it went, the way you hear things in a small trade where everyone knows everyone. There was a night, maybe 4 months after I left, when a chiller went down at one of the Bethany facilities, the same kind of emergency that had made my name a decade before. Tyler did not drive down in shorts and stay 31 hours. Tyler was on a golf trip, and he sent a junior tech, and the tech was in over his head, and the facility limped through a bad night that never should have been bad. Paul Whitfield noticed. Paul Whitfield noticed everything, always had. He did not say anything dramatic. He just started quietly to lose confidence that Pierce Mechanical was still the company he had trusted. Because the truth was, it never had been. He had trusted a man, and the man was gone. And no amount of continuity meetings could put back what walked out the door with me. When the contract came up for renewal, Paul did the responsible thing and put it out to bid. And that was all the opening I needed, because I did not have to take anything from Roland. I only had to be once again the man who answered the phone. The clients did not stay for the nephew. They had never been staying for the company. Roland laid off people I had worked beside for 2 decades, good people. And I hired 4 of them myself at better wages because they were the best in the business, and I had watched Roland underpay them for years. And slowly, account by account, month by month, the company Roland Pierce had built in his garage and grown into an empire on the back of my relationships came apart, and there was nothing dramatic about it, no explosion, no scandal in the paper. There was just the quiet arithmetic collapse of a business that had mistaken one man's loyalty for something it owned. Which brings me back to last Thursday, and Roland Pierce in a suit that no longer fit, sliding a folder across my conference table with shaking hands, asking me to buy what was left of Pierce Mechanical. I looked at the man who had held my daughter when she was 3 days old, who had stood at my father's funeral and called me the best he had, who had then written me a promise and spent 4 years deciding he would rather destroy everything than keep it. And I did not feel triumph. I want you to know that, because I think it is the truest part of this whole story. I felt a kind of sadness that went all the way down, the sadness of watching a man you once loved be defeated entirely by his own smallness. I did not gloat. I did not remind him of the email or the $41 dinner or the second father voice. I did not need to, he knew. It was written all over his ruined face. I told him gently that I was not going to buy his company. I told him the truth, which is that there was nothing left in it to buy because the only asset Pierce Mechanical ever really had was a thing that could not be sold, a thing he had never actually owned, her thing that had walked out his door the day he decided my loyalty was worth less than my override. I told him I wished him well, and I meant it, because my father did not raise a man who kicks another man when he is already all the way down. And then I stood up, and I shook his hand the way he had shaken my father's hand at that funeral, and I walked him to the door of the company I had built, past the good people he had let go and I had hired, and I let him out into the parking lot, and I went back to work. I still keep the job book, a new one every couple of years, black, hardbound, from the same store on 3rd Street, though the old man who ran it has passed, and it is his daughter behind the counter now. I write in it every working day, the date, the account, the promise made and the promise kept, in my own hand, dated where nobody can ever touch it. My daughter Katie is in college now, studying accounting, of all things, and last Christmas I gave her a black hardbound ledger with her name embossed on the cover. And I told her the same thing my father told me at 19. The same thing I am going to leave you with now. A working person's word is only as good as their records. The day will come, and it comes for almost everyone eventually, when a man in a nicer shirt than yours stands up and tells everyone a story about what happened, a story where you are the problem and he is the one who was wronged. On that day, charm will not save you, and neither will anger, and neither will being right in your own heart. The only thing that will save you is the truth, written down in your own hand, dated, quietly, for years before you ever knew you would need it. Keep your records. Keep your word. And never ever mistake the trust you have earned for something your boss believes he owns, because the day he learns the difference is the day everything changes. And I promise you, it changes in your favor. I think about Roland sometimes, more kindly than you might expect. He was not born a small man. Somewhere along the way, he came to believe that the company was him, that the accounts were his, that the loyalty of the people around him was a possession rather than a gift that had to be earned again every single day. That belief made him rich for a while, and then it destroyed him, because it was never true. No boss owns the trust his people carry. He only rents it day by day with how he treats them, and the rent comes due the moment he decides he is entitled to stop paying it. Roland stopped paying it the day he chose 4 years of my override over the 22 years I had given him, and the bill for that choice was the whole company. I did not send him that bill. He wrote it himself, in his own hand, the same as the promise he broke. If this one meant something to you, tell me in the comments where you are watching from and what time it is there. And tell me honestly, have you ever had a boss who mistook your loyalty for something he owned? I want to hear about it. Take care of yourselves, keep your own job book, and I will see you in the next one.